people, it's me, Eco Chick, and I'm here at Friends of the Trees, and I get to do a tree walk today with an old friend, Erik. And so I'll introduce you to him in just a moment. And yeah, can't wait to show off some of the most beautiful elderly trees that we have in our community. So more in a minute.
Hi, I'm Erik Burke, and I am an arborist with Friends of Trees, and grew up and went through the schools in Eugene, and I went to lots and lots of different schools in Eugene growing up because we moved all the time, and I think I went to 7 different elementary schools, and went to middle school and high school also in Eugene, and eventually got into volunteering as a teenager with trees here in Eugene. Started volunteering when I was 19 with trees, originally pruning trees, and then with groups that were trying to create no-mow zones in some of our natural areas around town to help out camas and other native plants, and then eventually started volunteering planting trees with different groups around town. And just did it as a volunteer on weekends for more than 20 years, and then about 15 years ago started getting really into it, and about 10 years became a full-time paid job, and I've been doing it ever since. And Friends of Trees is growing into a local nonprofit that engages volunteers to plant and care for city trees. We have all kinds of events. About every 2 weeks from November to April, we have tree plantings. In the spring and summer, we have volunteers who check on every tree that we plant and see how it's doing and give the treecipients advice on caring for the trees. And then as we move into the summer, we start doing tree pruning with volunteers, and we have about usually 6 events where volunteers go out and prune the young trees that we've planted over the last 3 to 10 years. And then we also have a bunch of educational events where tree walks, and we usually have 10 or 15 tree walks over the season also. So that's what Friends of Trees does. Here under this lovely coast redwood, and redwoods are one of the biggest. They get bigger than almost any other life form on Earth. They have these super cool cones, and I'm gonna hang on to one of these cones because we're gonna, I have one right here. This is a closely related tree we'll look at a little later, and it has very similar cones. Let me grab another one of these and try and find a good one. Yeah, here's one. They look really similar. This is from a dawn redwood, and this is from the coast redwood here. Yeah. And it's amazing. These seeing little tiny seeds in there.
Wow.
Those can become this giant thing. This could become 20 feet wide and live 2,000 years. And
wow.
It's probably only about maybe 40 years old right now. They can get this big. And so we love having this right outside our office. I often go and do phone calls when it's pouring rain underneath this tree, and it's totally dry. The other thing I wanted to show you while we're here is one of the projects that Friends of Trees has partnered with City of Eugene on, and we've done almost 30 of them now, are what we call Trees for Concrete. And so this stretch from the northern red oak across the street and the redwood on this side of the street down there to 13th Street, on both sides of the street there was no planting strip, and this is what we're calling the planting strip, the area between the sidewalk and the curb that's public right-of-way owned by the City of Eugene. It's all our property together, and typically it's where trees go, as well as utilities and all kinds of other things, and they're part of the infrastructure for a city. When they're paved over, then the sunlight coming in, particularly in the hot parts of the summer when it's 100 plus degrees or 111 like last summer, the sunlight hits that and it stores that heat and makes it very hot around all the concrete or asphalt in the street, and radiates heat out and contributes to the heat islands of our cities. And we've done made some videos where we have an ultraviolet gun, and you can when it's 100 degrees out, you can point it at a hot, totally paved over, unshaded area, and it's about 150 degrees at the pavement level. And then if you go just 10 feet away to a fully shaded area, it'll be at about the same as air temperature, 100 degrees. So there can be a 50-degree temperature difference just in the 10 feet of going it from an unshaded area to a shaded area related to this concrete or asphalt. And so what we've done is City of Eugene actually use their concrete cutters and jackhammers as volunteers on the weekend with one of our staff, and they cut out all the concrete that you see removed. Here, one big spot there, 2 big spots here, and then 1, 2, 3, 4 spots on the other side of the street. And so all this concrete got removed and trees were planted. I think it was around 2007 when the tree in front of this office and the trees across the street were planted. And those are big leaf maples, our native maple tree, which is one of the biggest. I think it gets bigger than any other maple anywhere around the earth. And it was also a tree the pioneers planted when they first came out here in the late 1840s, and they were dug up trees around the river and planted them along the streets that they built here in town. So we love this project, and eventually we hope the trees reach up and arc over the street and fully shade it and cool it in the summertime.
That'll be amazing. How many years do you think that'll happen in our lifetime, Erik?
Absolutely. They're really fast-growing trees, and they're growing maybe 3 to 5 feet a year. So I would say it's already coming out, shading the area out to here.
Yeah.
And I'll bet within 15, 20 more years, the street's fully shaded. In cities, there's permeable spaces, which are the areas where we remove the concrete. And then when water falls on this, it can go through soil, and the pollutants that are from our cars and other things, the bacteria in the soil can help break those down and process them before they get to our street. Because all the water that falls in our street and goes into the gutters, like the one across the street, goes directly to the Willamette River or Amazon Creek. So it goes directly to our streams. The only filtration is that some of the bigger chunks get caught down in a trap down there, but the water goes directly into the street. So cigarette butts that get thrown there, which are toxic poison for fish, that poison goes right into our stream. So anywhere we can capture some of that in the soil, process it and clean it before it goes to our streams is a good thing.
And same with smaller things that we can't actually see, like maybe soap from washing your cars and things like that we can't see it, like a cigarette butt, but it doesn't mean it isn't doing anything to the stormwater.
Yeah, and so there's an air testing station that looks for pollen on 15th and Oak, and what they often find where they just put a little oil on a slide, they find an enormous amount of brake linings and rubber from our cars. As we drive our cars, they're actually throwing off little microscopic bits of rubber that are in the air we breathe.
Wow.
And so trees help capture and take some of that off the air, and by catching it on their bodies, and then rain washes it down into the soil, which, like you said, can process some of that. This is a full block from Lincoln to Lawrence, and there is basically hardly any life. It's all what we would call impermeable surface. So the rain hits the building, it can't go into the ground. It hits concrete here or asphalt there, it can't go into the ground. It's almost an entirely paved over impermeable block that we're looking at here. And then all the stuff runs off into there. You can see the water looks pretty low quality in there, and that's going to go right to the Willamette. And so there's a little spot where it's not paved over here in the gravel. At least some of the water can go down into the soil.
Can see the plants are finding their spots.
But from here over, it's fully paved over. You can see there's enormous amount of lines, and there's high voltage power lines, utilities, buildings, and parking lots. And so this is our office right here, and we wanted to create a little bit of life. This is where everyone brings their dogs to walk in the offices around here.
Aww.
And so we got permission to plant 2 little pods, we call them, of native plants and life. And so here we have an Oregon white oak, and this is 1 year in the ground.
Oh.
And then some wild native roses, some native manzanita plants, which are really good for our bumblebees.
Okay.
And then these asters, which you can still see
Yeah, a little bit
some
of
of
the
the flowers
purple.
on, they bloomed for 3 months straight in the first year we planted them. This is incredibly good for pollinators. And then along the building there, we also have milkweed for our native monarchs. And we found a volunteer growing of our native Oregon myrtle tree, which is one of my very favorite trees. And we pruned it so it'll do well there. And so now we have this little area with more life on this block that has some benefits for pollinators.
Wow.
And you can see cool stuff. We took arborists that brought us wood chips and some chunks of wood. We have here with these great, I think these are turkey tails. I'm not sure what kind of fungus that is, but very pretty.
Wow. And is that paper birch or?
It looks like a European or paper birch.
Yeah.
And the Himalayan birch, it also looks like Himalayan birch or Himalayan birch.
Okay.
And most of the birches around town, in fact, all the birches except river birch, are dying out or being removed because of a bug called bronze birch borer.
Oh.
But really, if you go back to the root cause, it's that birches need summer rainfall. They come from summer rainfall areas, and so they're stressed by our annual summer drought, which and stress trees, bugs love them, and so they go right to them. And I'm not sure if I can see any, but this might be one. Bronze birch borer leaves D-shaped holes
Okay.
in the bark, and that's one sign that you have them. So people who have irrigation around town, their birches tend to last a little longer sometimes and not get the bronze birch borer till a few more years down the road.
Okay. And is that a newer development? Like when did that start happening in our area, would you say?
Gosh, it seemed like about 5 years ago.
Yeah.
It really spread. It's in Corvallis and up the valley
Okay.
now, and I honestly don't know what triggered it.
Right. Okay.
We're gonna go look at the related tree to the redwood here, dawn redwood, and some flowers that are blooming and a few other trees.
Cool. And is dawn redwood like the dawn of the day? Is that how it's spelled? D-A-W-N?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dawn redwood. It has some scientific names that are really fun to pronounce. That's one of them. Its scientific name is Metasequoia glyptostroboides.
Woo, that's a
And-
mouthful.
It is a mouthful. And it was thought by science to be extinct, and was a scientist was walking through a remote valley in China. We'll cross here, and found a grove of them. It was thought to only exist in the fossil record and to have gone extinct millions of years ago.
Wow.
And they found that it was still living and growing. He brought back seeds from that valley in China, and they, starting in the 40s, I believe, they were planted all around, mostly at universities for a while, and since then they've become planted regularly around town. I want to just take a minute here and look at these 2 huge trees here, and you can see licorice ferns growing on them up there. The one on the left is a big black walnut, and the one on the right is a big leaf maple, like the ones we looked at that we planted over there. And this walnut is really fun for me, living near, working right over here, because crows come and they take the walnuts when they fall, when they still have the green fleshy fruit around them, and they fly them up in the air and drop them in the middle of the intersection over there. And my first thought is, gosh, crows are kind of dumb. They're flying them into the street and it doesn't break them, so they can't eat them. But they're actually had taken their thinking to a whole new level. I read this morning crows can think some crows like about the level of a 7-year-old
Yeah.
child. And so they're actually putting them there for the cars to run over them, so then they can eat them.
Brilliant.
So they're very, very smart. And it's fun to watch them do that here in the fall.
Cool.
And so across the street, it's amazing that it's the middle of winter here, but it's actually almost springtime, and the flowers are starting to go in full bloom. And this is one of my favorite flowers. This started blooming over a month ago.
Oh, wow.
It started blooming at the beginning of January. And these are an old-fashioned bulb or flower that I just love. This is one of the nicer groves of them downtown, called Snowdrops. Mm-hmm. And back east, they come right out of the snow and bloom. And I love these little flowers. And this one's been blooming for almost a month now.
That's amazing.
So we'll look at, I think, 5 or 6 plants that are blooming. This big leaf maple that's being topped here has amazing ferns on it. But it's planted right under, or it came up on its own under a power line there.
Wow. And so they're trying to work around it, but...
Yeah, but it sure is providing a lot of life and habitat.
Yeah, it is, and shade.
And one thing that's really nice in this little stretch of downtown is the conifers, or evergreen trees we have growing. And I love these 3 Doug firs across the street. And another example, there's 2 big leaf maples that we planted there that are getting very big already. I think they were planted about 15 years ago.
Okay.
And then a lot of people don't realize, but there are some palms that can grow in Eugene. And this is I know almost nothing about palms, other than they're a kind of plant called a monocot, like a lily.
Okay.
So I think they're like a grass.
Huh.
But I just don't know much about palms, but I enjoy watching this one.
Yeah, well, and you can see it's got the growth from where fruit would be. This almost looks like a date tree.
Yeah. This is a nice little place where you can see trees in the wintertime. And one of my favorite native trees is our vine maple. And then right next to Japanese maples, which it looks kind of similar to, and are both used in a similar ornamental planting fashion in the cities. And so you can see 2 different species with kind of similar habitat and form.
Right. And does the vine maple, like in the forest, its bark looks so green. Does it grow differently when it's in the city by itself?
Sometimes you'll see it like... It's often very red, too. So sometimes it's bright green and sometimes it's bright red.
Right.
And so on the fresh... This is the last year's growth. And so you can see that's very red. But I've seen lots and lots of it, even in the city when it's young. We plant a fair amount of them around town.
Okay.
And sometimes they're green and sometimes they're red.
Interesting.
We'll look in a minute at a different incense cedar, but these are really pretty incense cedars here in the city, and you can see that they just finished pollinating. Incense cedar is the first of our trees that puts out a lot of pollen. It got a lot of people this year because it wasn't very rainy. Normally people don't get bad allergies from it because it blooms in the middle of winter when most people aren't outside and it's rainy. This year we had a long, dry, not very windy spell, and I came over here a couple times and just whacked the cones, and huge clouds of pollen would come out.
Wow.
These are the pollen cones that release the pollen that are now covering the ground. But we're going to go over and see. There's a deposit of the pollen still in the ground that we can see from the one down by the building there. And it's even more, a little area with the conifers is very nice here.
Yeah. Really shady.
And we're going to go over and look at this grove of 7 trees. I was on a volunteer team that helped plant these back in 1992. And they are the tree that is related to the redwood. This is the one from the fossil record that was found in China called Dawn Redwood. And they're like their cousin, the giant sequoia, which is also related to the Coast redwood and the Dawn redwood. It's in the cypress family, or a subfamily in the cypress family called the Taxodiaceae.
Taxodiaceae. Wow.
This one is very unusual and different than the redwood and the sequoia in that it's a deciduous conifer.
Huh.
So very unusual. There's only 4 deciduous conifers on Earth, and we're going to look at 2 of them today. Actually, we'll look at 3 of them. The only one we won't see is the western larch, or the tamarack it's called.
Okay.
But we'll see 3 deciduous conifers. And so the leaves of these turn kind of a golden brown in the fall and then fall off. And you can see some of the needles here at the base of the tree. And then they're bare like this, and you can see their pollen catkins hanging from them up there where they'll release pollen. But what's really fun about these is at the base they do 2 things. What giant sequoias are famous for is they buttress. The trunk comes down and then it swells out really wide. And then with these ones, they also do something called fluting, where they have these kind of caverns and different shaped trunk at the base. I love this one. This is kind of the best one of the bunch for that, and really cool. And then we can also see something that happens in cities where people vandalize trees. And so this tree has been hit with a machete here, here, and here. And but it's way tougher than whoever did this, and will outlast all of that and be fine.
So glad.
But it's also cool on some of these. On the second one down there, about 10 feet high, you can see where woodpeckers been pecking.
The sapsuckers.
And oh yeah, you can see up on this tree too. The sapsuckers peck in there, and then they get both the sap, but also the insects that come to the sap are really nutritious for them.
Nice. And then other insects will come, like mason bees and things will come and take those. Like they will reuse the hole, which is so cool.
Yeah, it just makes it a whole habitat thing going on.
Wow.
So I love this grove of Dawn redwoods, and it's so cool. One of Friends of Trees' slogans is, "Hey, I planted that," and this is an area where I can come and feel really good that I helped. You know, it's just one out of a bunch of volunteers, but that helped plant these, and now they're a great addition to downtown Eugene. And we're gonna go look at this big incense cedar here, and the second of the deciduous conifers was planted by City of Eugene last planting season. It's only been 1 year in the ground. And it's a bald cypress from the southeastern United States swamps. And very, very cool tree. So its needles or leaves turn a golden brown in the fall and fall off. These ones are super cool. You can see a great example of this in the mill race across to the north of Lawrence on U of O campus along Franklin Boulevard in the ponds there. There's a big one of these, and what they do to breathe when their roots are all underwater is they send up these things that look like a knee, and or a periscope. It pokes up out of the water, and they take in oxygen and carbon dioxide through those. And you can see example of that there. They get huge. This is a great place for it, and it's really cool. The city planted it here so that it'll work with these Dawn redwoods over here. So I'm excited to watch this over time.
Wow. And I notice it does have dedicated watering, so this will need
Yeah.
because it's from a swamp, it will need to stay pretty wet, or
It's from an area that is used to getting rainfall in the summertime. Like everywhere east of the Mississippi pretty much gets the majority of their rain from May to October, whereas we get the majority of the rain the opposite season, November to April. And so we get almost no rainfall during the growing season of the trees.
Interesting.
Which makes our native trees have to learn to adapt to that, whereas ones like this don't. However, sometimes they come from swamps that dry out in the summertime or don't get rain, so they're pretty tough and probably could survive in good soils like this without irrigation after 3 or 4 years of water.
Cool.
I wanted to show you here, we talked about the incense cedar pollen that was going on really heavy about a month ago, and there's still marks of a deposit of it that a huge amount came down in the ground, and then rainwater washed it into these cool patterns.
Oh wow, yeah.
And for a while you could follow it all the way along over here, and then it kind of comes over here.
Wow.
And goes off into the soil. But there was a lot of pollen that came down.
That's crazy. And will you talk about what this is? A synthetic? Is this?
Yeah. So this is when this capstone housing project was put in, I don't know, 5-10 years ago. There was a push, and there's a push all across the U.S. to find different paving materials for our sidewalks.
Yeah.
So here's concrete. Super expensive to like pave to here to the end of the street. There would probably be $10,000, maybe $10,000. A lot of work, huge amount of energy, and we mine the gravel that makes concrete. We use a huge amount of heat to process to make the concrete. Sends more carbon into the atmosphere, water, and all of that. So we're looking for alternatives, and some work and some don't. While I was recently in Mexico, I was admiring their sidewalks, and one of the important things that helps ultra-abled people in the U.S. is the American Disabilities Act. However, it creates conflicts for trees in that part of the act requires that we not have more than, I forget if it's a 1/4 inch or an 1/8 inch rise. And a lip like this is illegal under that act, and technically this has to be repaired, which is enormously expensive. And in Mexico, people they don't even consider that. And if you're in a wheelchair, you're out in the street. It can be hard, but it also is something that people are just used to. And the streets have giant holes in them. They have beautiful rocks. It's just a totally different landscape. I personally think a really varied walking environment is good for us, and it's good for us to be challenged, but we really like totally flat paved giant areas, and this is an alternative. I wrote a letter in support of it, and it turned out to be what considered a failure. So what happened, I'm interested in different kinds of pavement. Some that are used are natural rubber from rubber tap trees, and you can just plop a segment in place, and they actually breathe. They're porous, whereas concrete is slightly porous, but not really. And so these cracks make this an impermeable surface because water can drain through them instead of just being flushed off. And these are made from just mined petroleum.
Okay.
And
so a plastic product.
It's a plastic product, but I wrote a letter saying, "Hey, let's try something new." They tried this product. It warped, and now it's not clear who's on the hook for paying for it.
Yeah.
And the company went bankrupt, so they technically should have replaced it, but there's no way to follow up with them now. So I love trying new things. One of the main things the city's doing to help with trees now, the city surface maintenance crews, I think they're called now, they're concrete crews basically, is they put hinges in where these meet so that it can still comply with the American Disabilities Act, but tree roots can flex them up, and there's a flexible hinge
so it doesn't create an uneven surface like this.
Or crack too.
Or crack.
Yeah.
And the city's doing that more and more, and it's really helping out for trees.
Right.
So I'm very grateful to the city crews for using those hinges. I think they're called trip stop.
Yeah.
But
Then it would be more like a ramp. I guess you just keep
Yeah.
moving over it instead of tripping on it.
So it is more like a ramp. What we're hoping is to get more. There's the natural rubber. There's some new composite materials that are permeable, and then there's things like cobblestone pavement that's porous also.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of things like that are wonderful alternatives. So hopefully we're going to be working on more and more alternatives to the conventional concrete that we've used historically. I like it. Some people
It's
don't
very it's very fragrant. Okay, smell-o-vision. Wish we had it. Look at those teeny flowers, and they are putting out so much fragrance.
It's called Sarcococa.
Sarcococa.
And
Okay.
full bloom right now. So this time of year, it's the first day of February, I think.
Yeah.
And
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. There's tons of things blooming around town, and we looked at the Snowdrops, we looked at the Sarcococa, we'll look at a couple other things, but this yard has all these crocuses coming up, just an enormous amount. And then it also has the hellebore or Christmas rose or Lenten rose, a lot of different names, and then there's these yellow
Oh yeah, the yellow crocuses.
crocuses also, and then these coming up. I saw one white one blooming, are wood hyacinth.
Okay.
Which
and it looks like, is this a violet?
that looks like wild ginger to me.
Oh, okay.
I think that actually
Yeah, it's
could
a lot
be
of
what
it.
it is, and a huge patch of these Lenten roses, and then this giant big leaf maple here. It is so big, I can barely reach all around it, and
Wow.
just a wonderful tree. And but I wanted to walk across the street to this parking lot, because one thing that's, or maybe we could just look at it right here. One thing that is fun about cities is that we have trees from all around the world. And so those two beautiful trees there, which are phenomenal in the fall because they're sugar maples and just have amazing fall color. And they're really interesting because they have different leaf shape, different bark, but they're both sugar maples. And they're from Appalachia, the east coast of the U.S., up and down from far south all the way far north. And then we have the big leaf maple here from the Pacific Northwest. And then the last there in the planting strip are Norway maples, which are
Okay.
northwestern Europe. So,
Wow.
and then right here we have these really nice examples of Japanese zelkovas, which are from Eastern Asia.
Wow.
So we have 3 continents represented just in a little half a block area right here.
Okay.
Very neat to see.
Super neat. Wow. And I also noticed something over here that I wanted to point out, and it is this banana peel. And so often we as humans are like, oh, it's organic, I'll just throw it out my window, or I'll just drop it on the ground. But believe it or not, this banana peel has probably been sitting here for months, and
A long
it's stickers
time,
there,
yeah.
and it isn't going to just break down. So when we throw food out our window, it's still littering. And so just something to think about. I can never help myself, I have to point that out.
Good point. I'll take the plastic and throw it away.
Thank you.
The street, you can see those Japanese zelkovas.
Yeah.
And then right near where the gentleman's walking there to his right is a Japanese katsura tree,
Oh.
which are beautiful trees. Those need water all summer long, their whole life. Thankfully, that one has heavy irrigation there, and it does really well. So it's nice to see a little Japanese kind of area here with
Yeah.
a pine that looks, I don't know what kind of pine that is, but looks kind of like a Japanese pine. And then zelkovas and the katsura from Japan.
Cool.
The city has, they created one of the best I've seen anywhere in the country. A few years ago, they created a new approved street tree list.
Oh, okay.
And they tried to really focus on trees that do well in our area and that are readily accessible. More of these
Oh, the hellebora.
hellebores here.
Mm.
And you can smell the combination of sarcococa and daphne now.
Yeah. Oh,
Coming up
here's
to,
more smell-o-vision. Wish you could smell it.
to Daphne, and I work just around the corner, and I come here twice a day and just smell the Daphne. It's been blooming for about 2 weeks and will go for months. It'll go for at least another month, probably more like 2 months. And so it's just a wonderful place to kind of refresh after sitting in front of the computer too long.
Yeah.
And
Oh, a couple roses still going.
and
Crazy.
while we're here, this is a yoga studio, and it's kind of nice. They have a little bit of a Japanese theme, and so this ginkgo was planted here, and that is number 3 out of the 3 that we're going to see of deciduous conifers.
Oh.
Ginkgo is an ancient tree, over 100 million years old. It's been on the earth, and before the flowering trees developed around 65 million years ago, everything was either related to more ancient plants like horsetails or to conifers or cone-bearing plants. And so these are very weird in that they have separate male and female trees, and the females have a fleshy fruit, which conifers aren't really supposed to have. But within there is a seed that's edible, and the fleshy part is very, very fragrant, but typically not perceived in a positive way. If you want to get a taste of it, go to my favorite grocery in town, Kiva Grocery over there, and on the south side of the building is a female ginkgo, and the fruits are falling from it right now.
Cool.
And they're typically thought to smell kind of like throw up or dog poop.
Nice.
So this is a male and has really pretty form, and their leaves turn brilliant golden yellow and tend to fall off all at once. I used to have a job collecting leaves from ginkgos on Oregon State University campus, and we'd shake them and they'd fall off all at once, and then they'd use them in stream ecology research.
Oh, cool.
And so wonderful, pretty, beautiful tree.
And it's planted, even though it is, in between on the street, it doesn't have any wires above it, so it's going to be able to keep its shape.
And it can get very big. And then what I wanted to show you, across the street, the city has beautifully pruned this big leaf maple, some people think this has the nicest canopy of any of the big leaf maples in town. It's a giant tree, giant canopy. You can see it that one tree fully shades an enormous area of the street. It comes all the way over, almost onto the sidewalk over here.
Wow.
The city climbed it and did a beautiful job pruning it.
Yeah. Boy, climbing that was a skilled climber.
And then we have more of the
Delicious smelling sarcococa over
Oh,
here.
yeah, and this is really blooming nicely right here. It's protected more next to the building.
And this is my little fragrant area that I visit. And in the wintertime, it has wonderful fragrance. And then this tree and these two trees here, I wish you could have seen it a couple months ago when these cool flower pods were brilliant colored, and now they're kind of withered up. But this has a great common name, Harlequin glory bower, and it bloomed and was fragrant with a really yummy smell from its flowers for over 2 months during the summer, and then its leaves have a really peanutty smell that's nice too. And then chrysanthemums blooming.
Yeah, still blooming.
We're just going to look at a few trees. With climate change, big leaf maples have been struggling a bit and struggling to establish. And there's two young ones that we planted again about 10 to 15 years ago. That one's really struggled, but over the last year it finally kind of kicked in and is doing better.
Good.
There's that plant again.
Oh yeah, I have to look that one up.
One of the things that happens in the city is trees become in conflict with the hardscape we build, and we tend to, or almost always, prioritize the hardscape over the trees. And so here's 3 trees the city's going to remove that are posted for removal. A locust here to the south, and then 2 American sweetgums to the west. I love the sweetgum. Has some of the most beautiful fall color. It's got these cool seed clusters. When we were kids in the neighborhood Tana grew up in, we'd walk around barefoot and stomp on these and try and show how tough we were that we could stomp on them. But I am sad to see these go. It says that in order to complete repairs to meet safety standards, which is probably related to the American Disabilities Act we talked about earlier, to fix the sidewalk, they'll have to cut so much of the tree's roots.
Okay.
This is saying that they'll have to remove the tree for the tree to be safe.
Okay.
Very sad to see a tree that
Is healthy.
this is huge. It does have a big codominant stem here where these 2 branches come up. This is a place where a tree could be predicted to break if it had a lot of ice and snow weight. In the ice and snowstorms we've had over the last 10 years, almost all the sweet gums have a pile of broken branches and debris at the base of them, so they tend to be somewhat weak wooded. I hesitate to say that, but so it's kind of sad to see these go. You see some woodpecker activity up there too.
Yeah.
Beautiful
look
trees,
really different.
probably better in the long run. They're prohibited by the city in public right-of-ways now on the approved street tree list.
Okay.
However, it was the most planted tree in public right-of-ways in Eugene in the 70s, and so they're super common, partly because they do so well in the clay soil we have in South and West Eugene on the flat. So the roots can live near the surface and get oxygen in places that are hard to get oxygen in. Here they have good soil, but they're the it's not a huge
Yeah.
conflict, but back there it pretty much is. That could be
Oh, yeah. That could be dangerous.
that could be dangerous. So sad to see these guys go, but
Yeah.
hopefully they'll be replaced with some good trees in the future.
Yeah.
I do want to show you one of my favorite trees in this whole neighborhood, and actually one of my favorite trees in town is this beautiful tree across the street. And look at the sidewalk
Oh, yeah.
issues with that. I've been very vulnerable tree, very special tree. It is it's a kind of oak tree called valley oak. It's the oak of the lowland Sacramento Valley,
Okay.
from and the San Joaquin and Sacramento River valleys in central California. And it gets bigger than any other oak on earth. There's, I think, 300 to 400 species of oaks on earth, and none of them get as big as this. It can be 10 feet in diameter plus.
Whoa.
I've seen them on the Hunter Leggett military base in California, 8 to 10 feet in diameter.
Oh, wow.
It can get over 140 feet tall, 100 feet wide. They can become giant, very sturdy, beautiful tree. Great tree for climate change here. We're beginning to grow and plant them. You can see young examples east on 12th, just east of High Street, where we planted these, that are doing really, really well here. They love it here, really thrive. This is the biggest one in our area.
Wow. How old would you say this one is, Erik?
Boy, if I had to guess, I would say 60 years.
Okay.
50 to 70 years, but I
Yeah.
really can't say.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it's in a challenging location for its long-term survival because
Yeah.
it's right next to 2 driveways and a sidewalk.
Yeah. Yep.
On a property line.
Yeah.
However, I have talked to the property owners nearby and City of Eugene and conveyed my hope that they'll all work together to preserve this tree, and people seem on board with that.
Yeah.
So we hope that it has a good lifespan ahead of it.
Yeah, me too.
And here's another young big leaf maple that we planted. This one's doing really well. It's
Yeah.
and we're heading towards the end of our walk, where you can see the top of that coast redwood there, and it is a giant redwood. Actually, it's probably kind of a baby to mid-sized redwood. This is one of the bigger Oregon ash downtown, which is our native ash tree. It's our only Oregon native member of the olive family.
Okay.
And this is a pretty big one. So we're wanted to end our walk here at this beautiful redwood. It's about 10 feet in diameter. I mentioned some of those oaks can get this big in diameter. The city did a phenomenal job trying to keep this tree here. You can see they built a bump out here across the way, and they excavated all around the roots really carefully and kept the tree and pruned it really, really carefully, and they created a bunch more room for its roots. This is in a 9.5-foot wide planting strip.
Oh.
And its roots begin to extend past that, so they actually widen the whole area, so it has more room for it to expand and hopefully has a lot more life ahead of it. Many cities would have just removed it.
Yeah.
And so the city tree crews really valued this tree and worked to give it a good future. And this is the biggest one of the bunch here, but you can see across the way there's 1, 2, 3, 4 more redwoods there, 2 more there. And then past it, some incense cedars, and that house with the shakes is just been bought and is being made into a new kind of cooperative housing. There's going to be a lot of tree planting going on over there
Cool.
too. So this is a great place to end our walk by this beautiful coast redwood. There's a great proverb that's cited to various people and times and areas, but the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, and or now.
Yeah.
And it's a great time. I'd encourage people to come out and get involved in various volunteer opportunities with City of Eugene or Friends of Trees, or many of the Friends of Beaufort Park in Mount Pisgah. Mackenzie River Trust is doing great volunteer work up the Mackenzie River, and a lot of other great volunteer oriented groups around town.
All right. Thanks, Erik.